Alright, before I say anything on this topic, I'd just like to preface this video with the admission that I am largely unfamiliar with Australian politics, as I was with the events surrounding the decision on gay marriage over the past several months. So if there's anything I'm missing or misunderstanding here, I'm happy to discuss these things with anyone who objects from a better stance of familiarity. That said, it is important to note that in a secular society, legal marriage and religious marriage are two very different things. And it was due to the failure to make this distinction that communication ultimately broke down and most were left talking over and past each other, scarcely addressing the topic of concern at all. In the end, most weren't even having the same discussion, because as I've said before, productive debate must begin with agreeing on the terms, and that simply didn't happen here. I began looking into this topic by hearing opinions from several other YouTubers who were more invested in the outcome, particularly from Australian natives. And I have to say, from everything I've seen, the entire ordeal was handled like absolute shit from the onset. Not really to the fault of anyone partaking in the discussion, but more because of the way this survey was conducted. It was bound to create miscommunication, and that's precisely what happened. YouTuber Independent Man made a valiant effort to shine a light of objectivity on the statistics surrounding the majority no-vote electorates, noting that foreign observers of socially conservative ideologies make interesting and decidedly convenient bedfellows with conservative Australian natives. And I can absolutely see why he'd approach it that way, but before he even started listing off the various demographics for the electorates of interest, I already had reason to be concerned that those statistics would raise more questions than answers. Should the law be changed to allow same-sex couples to marry? A survey that prompted a yes vote of 61.6% and a no vote of 38.4% of the 79.5% total participation rate. Now, as I read this question, I thought to myself, that could only be the title of the form that the ABS sent to everyone in the post. I mean, there has to have been more detail than that, right? There is no way that they reduced such an important legislative decision to the equivalent of a "do you like me, check yes or no" note passed to a grade school crush. But it seems that's exactly what they did. If this sample form and letter taken directly from the ABS website are of any indication, it's nothing more than a single piece of paper asking that very question, with a box for yes, a box for no, and a few moot bullet points. The most pressing of which being that only one box may be checked in order for the response to be considered valid, and the remaining simply requesting the use of a dark pen and instructing to use the paid envelope enclosed to send in the reply. The cover letter really only restates the instructions in the aforementioned bullet points, and while it did come with a separate page of other language help, based on its brevity and the complete lack of information preceding it, I can only imagine that this page conveys even less, which adds a whole new layer of gravity to Independent Man's citation of Mark Latham's criticism of non-English speaking cultural enclaves in Braxton, particularly in Jason Clare's butthurt response on behalf of these hard-working people in his electorate. Because it seems to me that, at least regarding the current topic of discussion, this isn't even a question of their economic efficacy so much as it is a question of just how much they understand in this debate in the first place. Especially when the ABS has done so little to clarify the terms, let alone accommodate those who don't speak English, and especially when the discussion is evidently laced with disingenuous attempts at manipulation. Case in point, Independent Man cites the Australian Labour Party's opposition to a public plebiscite on gay marriage on the grounds that it might have led to the suicides of young gay people. But how does that make sense? How would encouraging public discourse on the topic of allowing gays a right that they already lack encourage suicides? And even if that were true, how would that risk warrant stifling serious consideration of affording these people equal rights under the law? Further, if the true intentions of the representatives expressing that concern were in line with the wishes of the people they represent, the majority no votes in those electorates suggest to me that this might have simply been a convenient excuse on their part. They may have wanted no further discussion simply because they believed it very well could have resulted in gays being granted the right to marry. Obviously, because it did. But then again, Independent Man ended his video by stating that the final bill was supposed to be proposed before Christmas, well after the yes vote already went through. So when the people of Australia sent in their votes on a survey that was already severely lacking the clarification of the term marriage, and they definitely should have known that not everyone voting observes the same definition, they were doing so with precisely zero idea what amendments would be made to the law in order to facilitate that change. In fact, it wouldn't be unreasonable to say that the majority of the participating voters most likely weren't even informed on the details of the current law, which essentially means that many of those who voted no may well have done so with the same concerns expressed by Baring, which were not in disapproval of gays having the right to marry, so much as in disapproval of opening an unknown can of worms that could potentially curtail free speech and religious expression. Now, having seen the Dean Smith bill as passed by both houses, I can more or less confidently say that free speech and religious expression are safe, at least as far as this piece of legislation is concerned. But of course, as is inevitable in this outcome, not everyone is satisfied. In a late-line interview with Michael Stead, an Anglican bishop of South Sydney, it was stated, "The Dean Smith bill introduced into the Senate states that ministers of religion will not have to conduct same-sex marriage and religious bodies won't have to provide goods and services." But Stead declares that this protection is not enough on the grounds that it does not protect the right to hold the alternative view that marriage should be between a man and a woman, nor the right for parents to teach this view to their children. Now, I don't claim to know my way around the legalese of this document, and again, I'm happy to consider any objections from those who would know better than I do and can demonstrate as much. The full text is linked in the description, feel free to have a look for yourself. But as far as I can tell, Michael Stead is dead wrong, as is anyone who parrots his concerns. The protection of religious freedoms is in the name of this bill and in the stated purpose, and the intent to preserve a religious celebrant's rights to both conduct marriage ceremonies in accordance with the doctrines of their faith and refuse to conduct a ceremony that would contradict those doctrines is stated from the main amendments section of Schedule 1 throughout the full length of this document. Quite frankly, that's far more accommodation than I would be willing to give, or any secular country should be required to give, because it seems to me that Australia observes the separation of church and state in the same manner that the US does. And as far as I'm concerned, any entity or institution provisioned with the federal authority to solemnize marriage should not be allowed to pick and choose which people they will or will not serve from everyone whose rights are protected under federal law. And if it were up to me, if your church would insist on denying service to anyone protected under federal law, your church would not be endowed with that authority. Sure, you could continue to perform your ceremonies, but your discrimination would be considered unlawful, and any marriage you solemnized would have to be ratified by a federal office that doesn't discriminate. And yet, the Australian government is allowing you to have your cake and eat it too. So far as I can see, there is nothing in this document that infringes upon your right to your religious beliefs, your right to pass those beliefs on to your children, your right to preach those beliefs to the followers of your church, or your right to discriminate in your marriage ceremonies on the basis of those beliefs. It even goes so far as to preserve the federal recognition of your solemnized marriages despite allowing you the freedom to discriminate, which is like allowing you to run a DMV out of your church, but also allowing you to refuse a driver's license to any gay person because it somehow doesn't align with your beliefs. And that is ridiculous. If you believe as Michael Stead believes, then your concerns are not with any right from which this bill deprives you, nor are they with any right with which it fails to protect. Your concern is that you don't have the right to impose your discriminatory practices onto the government, which is meant to protect the rights of every citizen regardless of their religious beliefs or lack thereof. And that's a right you never had in the first place. And honestly, as outraged as you are that the Australian government would recognize a same-sex marriage, you should be even more outraged that it would recognize any marriage solemnized by any religion that observes a deity other than the God of the Bible, if the first and second commandments are to be upheld. And yet, nobody is forcing you or your religious institutions to oversee those ceremonies either. But you won't protest the recognition of those marriages, will you? Because you know that the closer you get to petitioning the government to reject any and all marriages that are not conceived in the observation of your faith, the more people you will alienate and the more backlash you will receive. And you are not prepared to fight the backlash from all of those people, especially not when your government owes them the same protections it owes to you. Your home, your children, your church, and the consenting adults who observe your faith are within your dominion. But public places and services to which every citizen of your country has an equal right are most certainly not. Anything taught, communicated, or displayed in those spaces will not respect the teachings of any one religion to the exclusion of any other, and that includes Christianity. This is just another one of those problems where I see faults on both sides, and I know both sides are going to get their panties in a twist because of it. And the really annoying thing is that this should be such a simple problem with a simple solution. Stupidly simple. It should require next to no thought. This is not a give them an inch and they will take a mile situation. This is a simple matter of treating others as you would like to be treated. But because of the back-asswards way this decision was handled, an age-old environment of religious paranoia on the right, and new and ridiculous heights of moral authoritarianism on the left, it became an absolute clusterfuck. Complicated well beyond what it should have been. In the end, we were left with people haphazardly voting yes, completely ignorant and uncaring of what changes were to come so long as they got to virtue signal, and who knows how many people who voted no simply because they needed more details and reassurance that no rights would be infringed upon. No voters who would by and large be labeled bigots by the euphoric yes voters who could not be bothered to consider consequences or entertain actual discussion. People of all the YouTubers I've seen who commented on this topic, Alright Hey was definitely the most level-headed and logical, especially as a person who was twice affected being both an Australian citizen and a gay person. Not only did he respect the person's right to vote no, he highlighted the all-important distinction that I made at the beginning of this video, legal marriage versus religious marriage. That's where all of this got out of control and where all of it can be put back on track. To the Christians opposing this decision on the basis of your religious beliefs, not every marriage falls under the jurisdiction of your faith and does not necessarily require your approval. This has nothing to do with your religion. This is about gay people who already have the right to be together and who have already attained a large amount of acceptance in society, also having the right for their choice to be together to be legally ratified. No more, no less. And you are no more correct in denying them that right than you would be correct to suggest violence against them. This only ends when they are accepted in society, the parts not overseen by your faith, to the same degree as everyone else. And this will happen whether you like it or not, because not everyone believes as you believe, but we do all have to share this planet. And getting along is always the best recourse if it can be achieved. Nobody is going to start marching into your churches with government authority to force you at gunpoint to marry gay people. And even if they did, there would be skeptics who would fight it right alongside you on moral principle alone. Just the same as there are atheists like myself who are fighting the policing of speech and social justice agendas in schools, you can rest assured that many of the people you call sinners, like gays and atheists, will fight right alongside you if schools start actively admonishing your faith in an official capacity and calling you delusional. Because even if some of you have used that faith to try to step on people like us, we still acknowledge that most of you are peaceful and will defend your freedom to believe as you will even if we don't share those beliefs. We will not, however, view schools promoting the acceptance of gay people as an affront to your faith. Because whether you like it or not, gay people share this world with us and deserve to be treated with decency and respect just the same as any one of us, so long as they give it in turn. Most gay people would not seek to marry in the observation of your faith because they're already well aware of your opinions on the matter. And even if they do, you are free to denounce whatever branch of your faith allowed them to do so, just as you are free to view their marriage as a false marriage. But you are not free to use the government as a weapon to prevent them from attaining a basic human right on the grounds of your beliefs, because you do not have the right to impose your beliefs or enforce its tenets onto others who do not subscribe to your faith. Period. And to SJWs? No, to everyone who voted yes in this survey. First and foremost, I truly hope that this sort of fiasco is not a regular occurrence in the amendment of Australian law, because it's given me enough pause to warrant looking into my own country's legal system in the hopes that our decisions are not made this poorly. I agree with you that gay people should have the right to legal marriage, absolutely, but in the storm of virtue signaling that has preceded and followed the vote, I have no doubt that a great many of you gave absolutely no regard to the consequences. And in the constant silencing of anyone who does not fall in line with the social justice narrative, I also have no doubt that very few of you cared about those consequences at all. You need to start caring, because you just gleefully gave your approval for your government to amend the law without a single shred of detail on what the current law stated, how those changes would be made, who would be affected, or what further conflict could spring forth because of it. You may not like it, you may not agree, but religious objectors are entitled to their opinions. So long as they don't force their beliefs on others, they are free to think whatever they want about whomever they want for whatever reason they want. And you are no more entitled to punish wrongthink than they are. You don't have to like them, you don't even have to associate with them, but you do have to respect that right. If you're going to make changes to the law, you need to consider very carefully all who are going to be affected and whether or not the rights of others are going to be violated. Fortunately, it seems that didn't happen this time, but it very easily could have. And with every predominantly white space you seek to diversify by pushing white people out, with every predominantly straight space you seek to shame for not being queer enough, and with every law you seek to change in order to accommodate the feelings of a tiny minority at the expense of the majority's basic human rights, you invite conflict. You spark justifiable outrage, and that leads to retaliation. At the end of the day, you cannot just sweep people under the rug. Those you choose to call bigots and Nazis don't just vanish when you step on them, and the amount of them who would have otherwise been keen to engage you in civil discussion shrinks every time you do, and every time you assign them those asinine labels. You are not expunging bigotry, you are practicing it and reinforcing it, and you are creating a societal rift that will one day come to violence. This is why people like me oppose you, because we abhor double standards. We will not approve of your bigoted rhetoric just because you have convinced yourselves that you are fighting bigots. We will not approve of your fascist methods just because you have convinced yourselves that you are fighting fascists. And we will not be swept under the rug either. If you want your opposition to listen to you with open minds, I suggest you start practicing what you preach. Because not every no vote in this survey came from a place of intolerance, and nobody is going to stand for being called a bigot by people who refuse to listen. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what you saw here, have a look at my other videos and leave me your thoughts in the comments. If you support my message, then please like, favorite, and subscribe. If you'd like to help this channel improve, you can reach out to me on Twitter or on Facebook with any suggestions. And if you'd like to support me more directly, please consider following me on Patreon, links in the description. Thanks again, and I'll catch you all in my next video.